have sympathy for those students and those teachers who are making that complaint that actually it may be fine for those who are good under pressure, but actually putting all the weight on exams really doesn't help those who are less able to deal with that pressure?
No, the exams are designed to ensure that children are better prepared for the next stage of their education or training. We consulted widely when we reformed these GCSEs to make sure they were suitable for children of all ability. And in fact, controlled assessments used to take up a huge amount of teaching time in schools, and it was very unpopular with teachers. So I'm very confident this is a better exam, and we should be congratulating the hundreds of thousands of young people who are collecting their results today on a tremendous achievement in getting to those exams and doing well in those GCSEs.
Do you think that one of the reasons for this criticism of the shift in emphasis, so it's now much more on exams than on course assessment, is something to do with the way we are as a society now? That we don't like stress, we complain about it, we avoid it wherever we can, and it's sort of seen as somehow wrong to put teenage kids, 15-year-old kids, under stress. You see, I'm actually with you. I actually think that exams are a very important preparation for life, because life is stressful. And it's not life or death in the examination room. But do you think actually that the backlash is something to do with the way we've become as a society?
Well, there's always been an element of stress in taking exams and tests. That's part of the education system, but we don't want young people to be unduly stressed by the exam system, and we trust schools to make sure that young people are supported and are well prepared for those exams. They do better if they're not stressed when they take those exams, but they are better.
You're not addressing the point that I was making. It's not controversial. I was just asking if you think, as a minister, do you think that actually, as a society, we're a bit timid and a bit put off by the concept of putting kids under stress?
No, I don't really accept that view. I think that stress has always been there, it always will be there, but we don't want young people to be overly stressed. And I don't think society has changed. We don't want to put young people under undue pressure. That's always been the case, and that remains the case. But I think these exams present just the right amount of stress for pupils, and taking away the repeated retakes that used to happen with the old system and the controlled assessment that used to take up many, many hours, I think itself added to the stress that young people were under. Now they can just focus for 2 years on preparing for their GCSEs without having to take exams during that period, and they can really learn the subject, get into the subject, and then take those exams at the end of the 2 years.
How much pressure, sort of exam-like pressure, do you think Boris Johnson is under after sort of Headmistress Angela Merkel yesterday gave him 30 days to come up with an alternative to the backstop?
Well, I think it's very encouraging that the European Union appears now willing to move on these negotiations.
Willing to move or willing to pass the buck over to us to say it's your job to come up with a solution?
Well, this will now form part of the negotiations with the European Union. I'm not sure whether the 30 days was a strict timetable or a more general issue, but we need to get on with this. We want to do a deal, but we're prepared as a government, as a country, for a deal or no deal. We need to make sure that we leave the European Union on the 31st of October. That's the commitment the Prime Minister's given.
We know all this. Let's keep it specific to the question. I mean, a couple of the papers today are basically saying that what Angela Merkel was really saying to the Prime Minister yesterday was, come on if you're hard enough. If you really think that we can deal with this in 30 days, over to you, mate. The ball's in your court. It was very clever politics, wasn't it?
We believe that we can do a deal, we can negotiate alternative arrangements.
What are the technical arrangements, Mr Gibb? I mean, I think now is the time for detail. What is it that's going to be up and ready for us to use instead of the backstop to prevent a hard border? What is this mystical technical solution?
Well, that will be the subject of the negotiations between the parties, between the UK and the European Union.
My understanding is that we've got to come up with something and present it to them. The negotiation comes after we've come up with the idea. What is the idea, I think we're wondering.
Yes, and there are many alternative proposals out there about how you deal with the technical issues of the Irish border.
Which is your favourite, then, out of the ones that you've seen?
Well, I'm not a negotiator with the European Union, but you can look around the world and see whether there are border crossings around the world that have technical answers to how you deal with the issue of a different customs union, a different customs arrangement across borders, but where you also want frictionless trade across those borders.
So you're
it is
saying
not
then that,
beyond.
So you're saying then, sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Right.
It's morning telly. We have to move on. But let's try and answer this. You're saying then that what Mr. Johnson will be saying within the next 30 days is a technical paper. He'll come up with a technical paper and say, if we put this technology on the border, that will answer the replacement for the backstop. That's what you're saying the solution will be, a technical solution, correct?
There are alternative arrangements that can deal with the conundrum of how you have Britain outside the European Union at the same time as wanting to have a frictionless
But
border.
you're broadening the answer again. I'm just asking you, will it be a technical fix?
Technological,
That's the question. Will it be a technological IT fix? Is that what it's going to be?
Well, that is the sort of thing, not necessarily just that, but that is the sort of thing we're talking about. Whether you move the border further back, whether you can have arrangements with large suppliers and get the paperwork done in advance. All these types of arrangements are the type of thing that we are negotiating with the European Union. But the key thing about yesterday was that Angela Merkel made clear that they are prepared to negotiate these issues. We want to have a deal with the European Union, but we are going to be leaving the European Union on the 31st of October with or without that deal. But the good news is now that it seems that the European Union are willing to move on this key issue.
Well, there's certainly wiggle room between what Merkel said yesterday, whatever her deeper motives may have been. I think she was playing very clever politics. And what Macron is likely to say today, which is no. He's going to repeat clearly what he's been saying all along. No room for the smallest renegotiation. Take the deal that Theresa May negotiated or leave it. That's that. Do you think that the Prime Minister is going to use that slight gap between Germany and France and get his knife in there and do a little bit of wiggling and try and separate them so he starts to disunite the EU?
Well, you can talk like that, but the key thing is that we do want to deal with the European Union, and we will negotiate hard to get that deal. There's no point.
Is he going to play France off against... Please answer the question.
Well, I don't know about...
Is he going to play France off against Germany? It's a really simple question. Everybody's asking it. Is he going to play France off, Macron off against Merkel? Do you think...
You're presenting this in Machiavellian terms. I'm presenting this in terms of making sure we get a deal when we leave the European Union. We have to leave the European Union on the 31st of October, and there's no point in presenting the same deal that was negotiated previously, because on three occasions it's been rejected by the House of Commons. So we have to remove the backstop. Alternative arrangements are an alternative to the Irish backstop, and what we saw from Angela Merkel yesterday was a willingness to start to negotiate on that point, and that means we can now have meaningful negotiations with the European Union. And if at the end of that day we don't get that deal, then we'll be leaving without a deal.
Well, let me put the question in a different way then. Do you think that Angela Merkel has given Boris Johnson the opportunity to put a bit of pressure on Macron, because there is now a gap emerging between Germany's position on this and France's? Has it presented him with a diplomatic opportunity? That's the question.
Well, the European Union have been very united about their approach throughout these negotiations, and I don't see that changing. But Germany is an important player. It's a leading player in the European Union. What the Chancellor of Germany says really does matter. And what she has indicated is that the European Union are prepared to move on finding alternative arrangements to the Irish backstop. And that means that there is the possibility now of negotiating a deal, which there wasn't until that statement yesterday.
Thank you. We kind of get all that. Will the Prime Minister use what Merkel said yesterday in his talks with Macron today? Will he use it to put pressure on Macron? That's what I'm asking you. It's really easy.
Well, I don't know what the details of those discussions between the Prime Minister and the President of France will be, but I do know that I'm now more optimistic following Angela Merkel's statement yesterday that we will be able to negotiate a deal. But of course, if we don't succeed in doing that, we'll be leaving anyway on the 31st of October with or without a deal.
All right.
Gibb, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is imaginative, isn't it, about how many different ways you can find to ask the same question, and yet the answer always has the same words in it.
Well, he's doing his job.
Yes.
I respect him for that, but I am up to there with politicians who simply give you broad spectrum answers to specific questions. It's like asking somebody during a war situation, what is our strategy to win this particular theatre of war? And then saying, well, it's very important that we win the war. So, yeah, we kind of know that. Can we just talk about this particular issue?
Yeah.
And again and again and again, on this programme and other programmes, you get these generalised answers which then drift into statements of, sorry, the bleeding obvious. And it's obviously a question for a government minister about what Boris Johnson, the cards he's now been given by Angela Merkel, how he will play them today. Now, we're not asking for inside information, but as a general, to give general answers to specific questions like that, is just a waste of airtime.